All right, we are back after a short break, and it is Commissioner Zemlich's turn to ask questions of Mr. Hightower.
Thank you.
So you don't think I could be short?
I'm not going to put the blame on you because I don't know that I can be short,
Okay.
Mr. Hightower, but thank you for your presentation. And I'm less organized generally than some of my colleagues, but I wanted to start off with you were describing a little bit of your background, and I think before the slides were no longer available, I saw one of maybe the FEF brackish water characterization map that I've seen in several exhibits, and you referenced the 1960s initiation of brackish water study, Office of Brackish
Office of Saline Water.
Office of
Saline.
Saline Water. So given the intervening 65 years or so, um, I'm not on produced water, I'm talking about brackish water. Why, to your knowledge and experience, are there any successful inland desalination facilities in New Mexico?
Yes. Well, it depends. Did you include El Paso as New Mexico? No. I'll give you some examples of inland desal facilities in the United States. Is that okay? So Texas has 50 brackish groundwater desalination facilities. Arizona has about 20. California has 50 inland. California has 2 or 3 seawater desal plants. But the largest inland desalination plant in the world is in El Paso. 30 million gallons of brackish water a day. And they're upgrading that to 40 million gallons of water a day. San Antonio is the second largest. They're at 20 million gallons of water a day. So we have, and in New Mexico, we only have one municipal desalination plant. That's in Alamogordo. That's a 1 million gallon a day plant that was designed for 1 million gallons a day. And it operates at about 500,000 gallons of water a day.
So given some of the concerns about the unknowns in produced water, in your opinion, why hasn't there been more of a focus on brackish water that hasn't been subject to the oil and gas production activities?
So I think what we're seeing is that a lot of the smaller communities currently are the ones that have water stress, most water stress, small towns. And for a small town to go in and put a desal plant is an expensive proposition, I think. And so I think that they've looked at brackish desal, so it's expensive. And then you have the concentrate that you have to dispose of. That requires an injection well, current injection well, class 2 injection well. That's expensive. And I think that what we're seeing in some of these areas is they know that they're looking for alternative resources. And when they see produced water is already on the surface. The oil companies are willing to treat it, kind of give it away, if you will. And the oil companies have saltwater disposal wells so they can dispose of the concentrate. And so for some communities, this is a much cheaper option than trying to put in a new desal plant. And I think that is why you're seeing some of the smaller communities in these rural areas that are experiencing drought are interested in produced water, because there's a way to pay for it by coordinating with the oil and gas companies. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Kind
it
of.
does. I guess I would just follow that up with a couple of additional questions. So you mentioned energy requirements and waste disposal. And it's been a while since I've looked at New Mexico's brackish water data, but it looks like the majority of the costs for the energy requirements in desalination are based on the salinity. And so when you have a brackish water source that's, 10 times the salinity of seawater versus brackish, which generally falls within, the range of what's potable and then seawater, would seem that, I mean, in your opinion, from a desalination perspective, what's the more expensive energetically to treat?
There's, first of all, I think the produced water that's at 100,000 TDS is 3 times seawater. I know that one of the other presenters mentioned 10. I think he just made a small mistake. So it's 3 times. But you're absolutely right. Um, the treatment of brackish water is produced water is more expensive. It probably requires a thermal process, which is probably 3 times or 4 times more expensive than brackish water desal. But if the oil companies pay $1 a barrel for disposal of produced water, they can treat it for $1 a barrel, and they treat it, they get 50% fresh water out of that, and they give it to a municipality. The municipality didn't have to pay anything. The municipality could get it essentially free. They didn't need to treat the water. They didn't need to pump the water. They didn't need to dispose of it. So I think you'll see some communities that are very interested, small communities that would have to raise their rates a lot, would be interested in a treated produced water for things like golf courses, parks, commercial, industrial applications, where they could reserve their fresh water just for drinking water. So it's the avoided costs of the municipalities by using treated produced water provided by the oil and gas, and the oil and gas then having avoided costs of not having to dispose of all of that produced water. So it's a different paradigm than the community having to go pay for produced water. They're not paying for it. They're getting it potentially free from the oil and gas companies.
Which brings me to another question,
Okay.
really. And sorry, I'm not better organized, but I understand the trade-offs of offsetting costs and benefits, generally speaking. But I believe Ms. Murphy testified to the fact that the industry itself, even though there has been, it seems, an increase in reuse within the oil and gas industry, it's having some challenges reusing produced water, recycled produced water for fracking operations. And I don't know if you were here for that testimony. But I wondered if you have any thoughts on why those challenges exist, and why, if there are recycling issues currently with sort of the emerging application, why those same hurdles might not exist for use outside of the industry.
So I don't know, Kathleen. I got to see what I didn't read. I didn't think
You
that she
can-
said anything about that. So I don't want to counter
So I guess
predict Kathleen, because I don't know that how she mentioned that.
okay. I would go. I don't have time to go back and look at it, but I'll just try and rephrase a little bit.
Okay.
So, the practice of recycling produced water within the oil field is, for unconventional purposes in the Permian, qualify that, is fairly new. And it is my understanding from NMED's testimony that it's not widespread. And I understand from my own experience that there's still a lot of fresh water that's used.
I don't think so.
And so I guess maybe you might not have an answer to the question of what those hurdles are within the industry, and how they might be a barrier here too. So I think I just didn't ask a question.
Okay, good. I could think I can answer the question.
Okay.
So in the 2019 Produced Water Act, I think the use of fresh water was encouraged to be minimized or even eliminated for uses inside oil and gas. And the current data that I have from OCD that they've provided to me and to the consortium to use is that we've dropped from 50% fresh water and 50% recycled produced water to 80% recycled produced water, 5% fresh water, and about 15% brackish water used for fracking in New Mexico currently. So they have changed in the last 3 years, they've changed their processes to try and eliminate the use of fresh water for fracking in oil and gas, inside oil and gas. And they've tried to do recycling. I understand from the oil and gas people that their effort is to try to do 100% fracking with recycled water in the next year or so. And right now, they claim that they use brackish water because the timing of their fracking versus the timing of their production doesn't always match. So they have to have some water, that extra water, and they're not going to use fresh water. They're going to use brackish water. And the only water that they're using now that's fresh is because it's required by law to have fresh water when they drill through the freshwater aquifers. So their focus is moving toward treating inside oil and gas produced water to a freshwater quality such that they don't have to use fresh water at all. That's the trend. And that's what I see.
And so, yeah, I guess I'll just follow it up with, and just to kind of bolster my remembrance of Ms. Murphy's testimony, is that there was kind of a lumping together of water in enhanced or secondary oil recovery and unconventional recovery. So I think that was her concern with teasing out the numbers.
Yeah, you do have to tease out the numbers, just like she said. There is still a percentage of the water that's re-injected from oil and gas for enhanced oil recovery. And so when you look at the excess produced water that would be available, you do have to subtract out that water that's going into EOR, because that's not available. It will continue to be used to recycle inside EOR. And the numbers that I mentioned, the 250,000 acre feet a year, includes that reduction of EOR. That's the excess water. That does not include the EOR water in that. That's the excess amount of produced water that we're seeing.
Okay. And so that was a little bit of a digression. We were talking about desalination for potable reuse. And this does maybe tie in a little bit to potential produced water reuse, which is waste disposal. And I think some of the other commissioners may have brought this up. And I do not know where Alamogordo disposes of its concentrate. But what volume of concentrate are like ballpark are we talking here, and where, who my understanding is that those are specialized landfills that need to receive that at a certain concentration it's no longer injectable.
So are you talking about brackish water, or are you talking about produced water?
Both.
Okay, so let me talk about brackish water. Currently, the Alamogordo plant has an evaporation pond. So if generally with brackish water, you can get, with a desal system, you can get 80% recovery. You got an expert here, you can check with him, but it's about 80% recovery. So you get for every 500,000 gallons that you treat, you're going to get 400,000 fresh gallons of water and 100,000 gallons of concentrated. And currently, the Alamogordo has about a 10 or 12 acre evaporation pond, and they evaporate that, and then those salts accumulate, and then they have to clean it out and take it to a landfill. The Brackish Groundwater National Desalination Research Facility, which is across the street, also has a series of evaporation ponds, and every 2 or 3 years they clean those ponds out from the water that they treat and put in there. So it's a common approach is to take the salts out and dispose of them in the land. At El Paso, they take the concentrate. They get about 90% recovery, so they treat about 30 million gallons a day. They get about 27 million gallons of fresh water and about 3 million gallons a day. 10% of that 30 million is a concentrated brackish water. They put that in a pipeline and pump it up to the state line and inject it into a geologic formation that's a limestone formation. So it's called deep well injection. They have a permitted deep well injection well for that concentrate. So that's brackish water. If we did treatment of produced water in the Permian Basin, as an example, you have, because the water's at 100,000 TDS, you don't want to concentrate. You want to treat it up to a level that it will stay in solution so that you can put it down a saltwater disposal well. You can get about 50% recovery. So it'll go from 100,000 to 200,000, and you'll get 50% fresh water, 50% concentrate. So you reduce the volumes that you have to dispose of by 50%, and then you have 50% fresh water. But that concentrate is at a concentration, instead of 100,000, it'll be at 200,000 or 220,000. That's below the solubility of salts, so the salts will not settle out, and you can inject them in the current saltwater disposal wells. That's the general approach that we see both in the Permian Basin and similarly in the San Juan Basin. But the San Juan Basin, because the water is higher quality, they get higher recoveries also, 80% recovery in the San Juan Basin, more or less 75% recovery. But they'll put the concentrate in the saltwater disposal well also. That's the way that it is being planned. That is what industry is looking at, and that's what communities are looking at.
So I guess if I'm understanding correctly, talking about small communities that have some extreme water shortage issues, the they would have to exist in southeastern New Mexico or in the San Juan Basin. Otherwise, you're talking transportation infrastructure. I'm trying to kind of tease out why the sort of local smaller desalination pilot projects might be, why communities may be averse to those, but treated produced water as a replacement for potable or non-potable water might be more attractive.
So yeah, the transmission of water is expensive. $1 million a mile for a pipeline, big pipeline. So I think what you're looking at is from an oil and gas perspective, that if they could dispose of that to communities locally without putting it in a pipeline, that saves them money. And it's potentially a water of a quality that they can use for maybe not drinking, but household uses, agricultural uses, livestock, watering, whatever. So I think that you're seeing some of these smaller communities looking at produced water as a quick, inexpensive way, because the oil and gas companies would pay for most of the costs associated with that, because they need to reduce their disposal volumes to minimize some of the adverse effects of deep well injection and things like that.
Right, and yet in those areas, I think the majority of demand for water is in the irrigation sector. I don't know that there currently exists, since I looked at the water use by categories that was included in the exhibits.
Yeah. In many cases, you're right. I know that you've done some studies. I've looked at your studies that you've done. Lee County and Eddy County, probably 70% of the water, fresh water used in Eddy and Lee County is for agriculture. So I think that's why you see some of the agricultural guys that are beginning to have issues with groundwater tables getting low. They would be interested in that water to support that. From an oil company perspective, that's a large user of water. That's a good source of takeaway for treated produced water. So the agriculture and irrigated agriculture or greenhouses and things like that, those are large users of water. And therefore, I think that there's the reasons that you're seeing the ag community interested in that, because trying to treat brackish water and pay for that is expensive for them when they have marginal costs of crops. Getting something free, it's good. Oil companies can give away a lot of water or sell a lot of water to agriculture and have a large use of large amounts of water.
And so to follow that up, I've noticed there's kind of a overlapping of, shortage, meeting that demand, and offsetting some of the hurdles energy companies are facing. In your opinion, for communities on the Ogallala in eastern New Mexico, Clovis, Portales, that are facing some really very urgent water shortages, this wouldn't really be a solution for them.
I don't know. If you look at the Permian Basin to Portales is maybe 50 miles, 60 miles, 60-mile pipeline. If the communities on the east side, let's just talk about Clovis all the way down to Jowl. So you got Clovis, Portales, Tatum, Lovington, Hobbs, Eunice, Jowl. If they put a water authority together and took produced water and were able to move that north and south from Lovington or Tatum, and they have money from and shared expenses for a trunk line or pipeline that goes between all of those cities, you might be able to move that water. When you're talking 200,000 acre feet, there's maybe a lot of water that could be moved for different applications, especially if you could throw in some industry that would pay for higher costs than agricultural needs of water fairly inexpensively. Industry can pay some amount for that water, so you throw that in, there may be some opportunities. And I think my discussions with people in Lee County, Eddy County, Roosevelt County, they're all saying they have ways to use that water. They're limited in water supplies for any further industrial development. They're running out of supplies to support their existing populations. So they're willing to put in some money to work with companies, thinking that this is potentially a readily available supply that they could have access to. And you put that in the construct of the Ute pipeline that's been talked about since 1965. It's still not funded and it's still not in place. And it's still $1 billion, $50 million for a pipeline from Tatum to Portales may be a cheap, with some low cost water, may be a cheap alternative to Portales than continuing to wait till they run out of water and then trying to get $1 billion to put in the Ute pipeline. So it's avoided costs and difference in the costs for new supplies of fresh water. Some of the mayors have looked at it and said, this is the cheapest, most readily available, quickest way to get new water on the eastern side of the state.
So sorry, you keep saying quick and cheap
Okay, I'm
and
just saying possibly,
pipeline
but
altogether.
compared to
Um,
65, I don't know how long you've been waiting, 45, 65 years for a U pipeline. I call that long term.
Sure.
So quick may be 5 years for them, and that's still quick. That may not be next week, but it's okay.
Um, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I guess what I keep coming back to is that conceptually, and I think previous witness kind of talked about theoretically, a lot of these things are possible, but are we there yet? And so I'm going to revert back to inland desalination in New Mexico. It's possible, not widespread. I think you've mentioned some of the barriers. Um, why is this not kind of jumping over that lower hanging fruit and reaching for something that is, I guess the term emerging has been used a lot by various folks. In your experience, in your background with desalination, is it a wise step to move from exploring those options to supplementing municipal supplies with produced water?
In the mayors that I've talked to, they're all looking at alternative supplies. And they all have this idea that we've either got to go out to brackish basins, put in wells to pump the brackish water, put in the deep disposal wells to get rid of the concentrate. Then we'll have to pump that brackish water. We'll have to treat it and move it to their community, which may be those brackish supplies maybe 50 miles away. Or they can look at, and so they're already looking at treating the water or treating water that's brackish or saline. And yet next door they have somebody that has a produced water that they're willing to treat for them. And if they look at the costs associated with that, it always comes out, it's coming out for most of those communities that working with the oil and gas guys to take that water at a cost comes out cheaper than trying to develop a well field in a brackish aquifer that might be 40 miles away and trying to pump that into that community.
But it's my understanding that the produced water consortium's work on those costs and risks is still under development. Is that correct?
No, we've done a lot of cost assessments for different options, and we actually have a model that we did with Sandia National Laboratories, Dr. Vince Tidwell, using systems dynamics models with some of the people at New Mexico Tech, Len Melchinsky, to do assessments of different options for the Permian Basin. That was funded by the Department of Energy, who was very interested in what options exist within the Permian Basin for reuse of treated produced water. And would communities be interested in it, and what kinds of economic development opportunities would exist? And in doing that study, what we found is that by utilizing produced water rather than implementing their own water systems, they end up with a positive of something on the order of $1 to $2 billion in the positive per year by using produced water rather than having to put in a different infrastructure, using the existing infrastructure.
What year was that study from?
2022 or 23. It's a socioeconomic model that's on our website.
So I'm just, again, if really we're just at the initial steps of characterization, how is that possible? I mean, I'm just assuming there would be, what was the cost that was driving the cost of of treated produced water? Or what was the constituent? Was it the total dissolved solids?
In general, yes.
Okay. So it sort of again fits into this. We have desalination technology that's been around for a while, have the ability to deploy it. It's not being deployed. If we're evaluating produced water through the lens of salinity being the most important constituent, we sort of get we don't get the full picture of actually the cost of treatment. Would you say that's accurate?
No.
If you're just considering desalination?
So you do have to consider both pre-treatment and post-treatment. And I think those end up being generally pre-treatment is an extra 10%. And post-treatment is probably another 10%. So you take what the desal is and the post and add another 20%, 25%, and then you're there. Okay. And I think that's kind of what we did with the study with Dr. Tidwell is included pre-treatment and post-treatment, knowing based upon the data that we had it in hand. And that's seems to be fairly consistent with some of the newer tests that we're doing. And that's how we did the cost. And the cost model was a model developed by Dr. Peju when she was at Colorado State and at New Mexico State that has all of the treatment, post-treatment, and opportunities and the costs associated with produced water. Okay. This ITDS model that she has. Okay.
Right. I guess, yeah, that was my question is if it's primarily driven by TDS, can it account for the costs of the additional constituents in produced water accurately?
No, ITDS was the name of the model.
Oh, okay.
Okay. It takes the other requirements in place. We'll have to get you in contact with Dr.
Sure. And just to follow up is because these sort of analytical methods are emerging for testing. And so my question to you is there's still seems to be a bit of uncertainty with the cost associated with it. And so it strikes me as an unfair, I'll rephrase that.
A fair comparison between brackish and produced water.
Correct.
Okay. And there may be some differences. And the one thing I would caution is we have to include is the fact that the avoided costs of the infrastructure because it's already there, willingness of the oil and gas companies to treat that water changes the cost equation significantly versus a community having to pay for all of that themselves. And that's an expensive cost for small towns, for small communities. And they often need some type of relief to be able to put those in because those are $20 and $30 million plans. Well, not that, anywhere from 10 to $15 million plants. And a small community of 400 people, it's very difficult to come up with that money.
Right. And so I'll just follow that up with in your discussion, perhaps response to one of the commissioners about the instrumentation that Dr. Zhu is using in the lab being very sensitive. My question is, sorry, I'm long-winded. We, I think as New Mexicans have all seen challenges that municipal wastewater treatment plants have encountered and mutual domestics and things like that. As it stands now, would those facilities have the capability of screening for some of these constituents that folks are concerned about?
So I think what probably ought to be looking at is, can we get enough data? And I think this is a suggestion by NMED that we need 8, 10, 15 data points that we can begin to identify how we would operate a system correctly. We've got a series of 4 or 5. We're working on another 7. We're not going to have them next week. But if we could get some consistency and understand how these things may operate for both the Permian and the San Juan, then maybe we can do some of the things that are typically done with water treatment plants, which is if as long as you get your process control, and we know what the output of that process control is, and we've tested that, as long as that process stays consistent, you don't have to do as much testing. Just do a little bit of testing to make sure that you're getting the right results. And that's something that we do in a lot of water treatment plants, is once you maintain, and as long as you can maintain your process control, you can move forward with this, not quite as much testing. But I think it's gonna take us a while. I don't think next week we can get a $5 million machine and at every water treatment plant. It doesn't make sense, I don't think. But I think if we can get some data points and we can figure out how to fine tune that and make that work, it may be that we have one of those facilities in the state of New Mexico that we take the samples to that facility and that's all they do. There's several different options, I think.
Right. And, in terms of deploying technology, I understand the timeframes, but my concern is there's really been just a delay in even having data available. I mean, it's been a while since I was in school, but some of that characterization hasn't changed much. And
Mhm.
so I'll just, oh, shoot, I moved pages entirely. I was going to read from, sorry. So this is from the Jang article in the Journal of Hazardous Materials that's been, mentioned a number of times that
That's the one from 2020, 2022.
2022.
It's
Yeah.
not the most recent one that I was talking about. Okay.
Right. But still fairly recent. And I would say, valuable in terms of understanding the scope. And it says, in the introduction that one of the barriers to use treated produced water as an alternative water source is the lack of comprehensive chemical characterization of produced water quality, and that to date most studies devoted to the produced water characterization have focused on the Appalachian Basin. And and then on page 2, the authors state that this study is the first step towards a better understanding of produced water quality in the Permian Basin. The objective of the study and our future research is to support, the various stakeholders, oil and gas industry, regulators, stakeholders with information so that you can do a risk-based assessment. And that's where I'm hung up, is because this is clearly, and I think it was, 46 samples um, uh, from 5 different sites. And it does seem to be a very promising first step. It does not seem to be, and by the authors, the characterization themselves, any sort of mature understanding. And so we have a fairly mature understanding of brackish groundwater. We're jumping into this area of something that we don't understand very much. And the reason that I bring it up is, and what we've heard from public comment is, why would we want to move forward with applications either that could potentially interact with ground and surface water when we've only just begun?
Okay. So a couple of things. One, that work was done in 2021, so it's 3 years old. We've continued to do work, and so we're getting more and more information. I'm not saying that we're there yet, but we're getting closer than they were when they first did that study. The other thing that people don't realize, I think, is that the brackish water resources that we have, even though we know kind of where they are, no one's done any pump tests with those. No one's done a full quantification of what the constituents are there, or what the true treatment might be, or how we would do the disposal. So we're still I'm taking it from a community leader's perspective. There's a lot of unknowns on the brackish side also. There's some unknowns on the produced water side. I think what I'm seeing is the community leaders are leaning toward I'll take a chance on the produced water because I think it's going to be cheaper than taking a chance on trying to go out and be cheaper and quicker than going out and trying to get water rights or brackish water, to do the pump tests and well tests to see that you've got a good aquifer, to figure out what the treatment might be when you know where the water is today on produced water, and you know what the quality is, and you know what the treatment costs might be. So it's risk in both cases, and I see them weighing that risk and coming up. They keep coming up on the produced water side. That's just the way it is.
Sorry, they who?
The community leaders that I've talked to, mayors of Jowl and Eunice and Hobbs, Lovington, Tatum,
Okay, so this is
Carlsbad.
okay, and I just have one last question. Given what you've kind of characterized here as this rapidly advancing research and characterization and treatment, and all of that being done in sort of our current framework, regulatory framework, what about this rule, this draft rule as it's currently written, prohibits continuation of that research as it stands today?
So, I think in the revised proposal, from what I understand, the revised proposal still had demonstration projects involved. The original had demonstration projects involved. And I don't know that I have seen, as the demonstration projects have not been removed, have they, Jason? I don't know, because
No, I can read from the rule too. So
Okay, and
I
if he
don't-
doesn't know the answer,
I
then
don't know the answer.
he does not know the answer.
Okay.
I would defer to NMED to say whether that's still in
Yeah.
the rule. I would think that we need to have more demonstration tests. There's no doubt in my mind that that's a requirement. We need to have the capability to do additional demonstration tests, or we're going to be limited into getting the better and better data.
So yeah, and I think my understanding of your previous testimony was that this newer version had the removal of the discharge permits, but it does have demonstration facilities included in it. And my question was whether any of your work, the consortium's work, Dr. Zhu's existing and proposed work would not be included in the characterization in the rule as it stands now, i.e. would the rule effectively shut down any existing research that is being conducted on the part of the consortium?
I do not think so. That as long as the demonstrations are still in there, then will not impact us. Will not impact the consortium.
Okay, and that was my last question. Thank you, Madam Hearing Examiner.
Thank you. I'm going to pause for a moment in the event any of the three commissioners on the platform have a question of Mr. Hightower. Just unmute yourself.
This is Bill Brancard. I have a few.
All righty, Commissioner Brancard, please go ahead.
Okay, I will go ahead. I will not turn on my video because nobody wants to see my face right now since I just had surgery this morning. Okay, so thank you so much, Dr. Hightower, for the presentation. I think it's been really helpful in a lot of ways here. When was the consortium formed?
In October 2019.
So following the passage of House Bill 546, the Produced Water Act.
That's correct.
And that Produced Water Act required this commission to develop regulations about produced water. Has the Produced Water Consortium ever presented to this commission?
No, we have not.
Okay. It's what I'm sort of hearing from what you've been describing, and I guess maybe I had a little bit of background from my previous job, seeing some of the scopes of work from the consortium, is the primary focus of the consortium on looking at proposed treatments of produced water as opposed to studies characterizing produced water?
So the consortium's major charter is to evaluate the safe and protective treatment and reuse for purpose reuse of produced water for different types of applications as identified in the Produced Water Act, which include agricultural, ecological, and public applications. So to do that, one, you have to know what you're treating. So we have to do characterization studies of the produced water to know what technologies are needed, or even more importantly, what kind of treatment trains will be needed to be able to treat the water to a safe level. And then we have to do evaluations of technologies to see that those technologies are robust enough to treat the range of produced water qualities that you see in any basin to be safe and protective of public and ecological efforts. So we have to do characterization to know how to design the treatment systems, to know what to be looking for, and we have to run the treatment plants to see what the efficacy of the treatment processes are to be safe and relative to the current requirements as they exist within the New Mexico Administrative Code.
Okay, so the study of the 46 wells, which I believe is the Journal of Hazardous Materials article that everybody keeps referring to, which is NMED Exhibit 140. Are we talking about the same document here?
I think so.
Okay. Is that the primary study that the consortium has done on characterization?
In characterization of the Permian Basin water, yes.
So
that-
you do
before-
one study in 2020 and that's it?
No. So the data that we had from most of the produced water wells in 2019 were from conventional wells, as was stated by NMED. So we ended up having to go out and look at additional wells to try and identify what we thought was representative of the Permian Basin. So the data that we have from the Permian Basin, 46 wells, was collected from data from industry and others, ourselves, to try and get a handle on the statistics associated with the produced water in the Permian Basin. So we haven't done an extensive survey since then on the Permian Basin, because I think we think that we have enough ideas of the variability in the basin. Now our tests that we're running are in different parts of the Permian Basin, the Delaware and Permian, so that we're getting data from different locations, and we're adding that data to our database as we test that water. But we're not doing a huge characterization effort currently. So we're using that data. We think that data is fairly representative of the Permian Basin.
Okay, so when I looked at the article, the researchers, in trying to figure out what possible constituents were in produced water, were looking at other basins. They seem to be looking at data from other basins around the country. But did they go through the frac focus data for all these wells?
I think you're talking about the Danforth study.
No, I'm talking about the one that is in the Journal of Hazardous Management. I believe I'm getting it right. There is a lot of discussion about constituents that occur in other basins, and when they're trying to figure out what to look for in constituents in the New Mexico wells.
I don't have that data. I don't know the answer to that question.
So
I
you don't
do
know
know-
whether they looked at frac focus data for those wells that they were testing?
No, I don't. I know that we were not looking at frac focus for the wells that we were looking for in the Permian Basin.
And kind of reading between the lines in your earlier testimony, it seems that the companies were not volunteering to give you data that is beyond frac focus about the constituents in their well. Is that correct?
I can't really answer that. The companies were not willing to give us other information. No, I do not know that.
Okay, and I'm talking about the trade secret data, confidential material that's not revealed in frac focus here.
So the data that we collected was well data. So whatever in the well, including the fracking materials, is things that we looked at. So it
Okay,
wasn't.
so you didn't start with knowing what they put in.
No, we did not.
Okay. So it appears from going through our extensive record that the parties have been so nice to give us all the articles they could possibly find about produced water across America, that there is a whole lot of them, or at least a number of them, that are from the consortium or members of the consortium. Does the consortium have a list of the papers that it has produced?
Yes, we do. It's on our
Published, I
website.
mean, published papers.
Yes. All of the papers.
I
that
guess,
we-
Madam Hearing Officer, Mr. Chair, it'd be useful if we could get that list.
Um, so Commissioner Brankard, I'm going to leave it to your counsel to advise you on the scope of the record that you're going to be deliberating on today. My understanding is that the commissioners really need to refer to the record made by the parties rather than going off and doing their own research. But I'm going to leave it to Ms. Miller
Okay.
to advise you on that.
Seems to me that a published article in a scientific journal we can take administrative notice of, but perhaps I'm going
Yeah.
way out on a limb there.
And that's a pretty long limb, again, in my opinion. But again, Ms. Miller's going to have to advise you on that.
So, Commissioner Zemlik asked you about your concerns with the latest set of amendments by the New Mexico Environment Department to its original proposal. I'm wondering, is your concern that demonstration projects would not include what you would call field testing, where you're actually using the produced water out in the field, if that's what I understand, what you mean by field testing?
No, I believe what the major concern is if you do our understanding, my understanding, I should say, my understanding was that the negative rule was to prohibit the use of produced water for any applications. I think I agree with that. I think most people agree with that, that the raw produced water is a hazardous material and should not be used. And that was the original proposal, that treated produced water could be looked at for these specific site, specific fit for purpose applications. And that's consistent with what's in the RAP, and that's consistent with what's in the Produced Water Act. And so I think that when it was changed to prohibit both the evaluation of produced water and treated produced water, that changes our scope within which we were required to do by the Produced Water Act, our charter, and that's something that seems to be at odds with our charter. That's all, and that's the only thing that we're disagreeing with. I think they have ideas that they want to continue to do demonstration projects. We have worked with them on notices of intent before. On all of our projects, we go through NMED. They've been very easy to work with as far as getting those notices of intent to do testing. They're quick, they're fast, they're reasonable to work with. I think that process works well. All of the industry that's worked with them is very happy in working with NMED on those notices of intent. But if you're going to say you can't use your technology once you've tested it, I think that there's an issue. And why was anybody going to come to New Mexico and try to test their technology? They'll go someplace else. So I think a prohibitive rule that prohibits even any opportunity for opportunities to use treated produced water stymies the opportunities for communities and other groups to have access to other supplies potentially. And if it takes 5 or 6 additional years to get this done, I think that we're in a position where there could be some issues in some of the communities that they're going to be out of water by then. And I see them worried about putting a prohibition on the use of treated produced water. That's what I see. That's the issue that I think I have with the regulation as it's been amended and amended.
Just let me try this again. Is what you're upset about, sorry, what you're objecting to is that it would not be allowed for treated produced water to be applied, say, to a field of alpha, a small field of alfalfa in a field test.
That is correct. That's an example that you gave, and I think that that's correct.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I appreciate your time, Mr. Hightower. I sort of feel like the consortium has been kind of marginalized in this whole proceeding, but I'm glad we had a chance to hear from you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Brankard. I'll pause for another moment in the event another commissioner on the platform has a question. Just unmute yourself. No. All right. We will then turn from questions by commissioners to questions by the parties. I know that Mr. Wexler had a conflict. Ms. Olson, I trust you're going to be posing the questions to Mr. Hightower. And
Madam Hearing Officer, excuse me. I'm not prepared to do the cross. Mr. Wexler had prepared that, and I'm going to ask if we could make an accommodation for Mr. Wexler similar to what we've made for other parties to see if Mr. Hightower, if it would be possible. I know he's not available tomorrow, for him to continue this virtually, possibly on Friday.
So Mr. Hightower, the whole reason we were taking you today is because I understand you're traveling tomorrow. Is it possible for you to present yourself for the remainder of the cross by the parties? The reason I'm asking is I had thought we were going to have a couple hours divided among the parties. We now have approximately 5 minutes apiece.
So how would you like for me to do that?
Well, you could actually call in if you have just a phone. If you're taking a laptop on travel, you can join us on the WebEx platform.
Whatever you'd like. I'd be more than happy to do it.
You
Just-
would? All right.
Yes, ma'am.
And tell me what your availability is between now and Friday.
I could be available tomorrow afternoon, and I'd be available all day Friday.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much for that. Let's begin your cross-examination then with some of the other parties. And when Mr. Wexler returns, we will accommodate his return.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Certainly. Mr. Maxwell, do you have questions of Mr. Hightower?
Your Honor, I have no questions for Mr. Hightower. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor, do you have questions of Mr. Hightower?
Good afternoon, Mr. Hightower.
Good afternoon.
So I just have a few questions. Just to clarify a couple of things. So in your testimony, you said that you thought that the best choices for the commission would be either to reject the proposed rule or to accept the rule proposed by the department in its original petition. And that's the December rule. Is that your testimony?
That was, yes,
And so I just want to think a little bit about what a potential permit would look like. So under the December rule, which just says that no one can discharge produced water until they have a permit from the New Mexico Environment Department. And so and you said you complimented NMED on the drafting of that rule.
I did.
I just want to understand what the rule might look like, or the permit, I'm sorry, would look like. Do you think it would be a permit for a specific place in New Mexico with a specific set of treatment trains and and pre and post treatment steps? Would it be the whole picture of a treatment idea? Is that what the permit would be?
I don't want to tell NMED what the permit should look like. I think the option for them to consider what a permit needs to be and what they would like to see is up to them. I just think the opportunity for people with technologies that are interested in moving forward, they could work with NMED. I don't want to tell NMED what to do or how that permit should look, but it could include treatment train, as long as it treats the water to a quality. It could be a small scale application, acre or 2 acres, or something similar to what has been done in other places as a field pilot, something that you could control. I just think that having that opportunity allows more innovation, allows people to look at opportunities, and allows us to get the kind of the field data that we're going to need long term without putting a lot of the environment or the ecology at risk, at major risk. I think if you delay things for 5 years, I don't know how that's going to allow us to improve technologies or accelerate technologies. So that was my thinking. I do not want to tell NMED what the application should look like. It's not my role.
Did you hear the department's testimony yesterday in response to cross-examination from Mr. Wexler that the department consulted with the consortium in developing the proposed rule?
I don't think that that's quite what they said. I think that they had mentioned to us that they were going to do a regulation that was what's the term? Prohibited, and they did. I took that to mean in our discussions that it was prohibiting the treatment, the use of produced water, and I agree with that prohibition. Raw produced water is not something that should be allowed. I do not think. In most cases, what we've seen is almost everything that I can see in New Mexico probably needs at least some level of treatment. And so saying that you could use produced water without treatment, I think is inappropriate from both a health and safety perspective, which is part of our charter. So as far as prohibiting that, I'm all in favor of that. And that's what I thought that the rule was going to say. And when the rule originally came out, that's exactly what the rule said. It was the later revision of that changed from a prohibition of raw produced water to prohibition of raw produced water and treated produced water. That's the only issue that I have.
And so, thank you. So let's talk a little bit about the knowns and the unknowns. You mentioned identifying about 20 previously or non-targeted constituents in treated produced water. Is that
That-
correct?
In the Permian produced water, that's essentially what we've seen is 20 non-target, 20 constituents that don't fit into our targeted analysis, which is looking at over 400 constituents. So yes, we do find these, what people would call unknowns. I call it untargeted. And we've now found those, and we know what they are and what their concentrations are.
And so when you did that study, well, let me back up. You also talked a little bit about encouraging the oil and gas industry to use blue fracking compounds or techniques that would be more common materials. But the study that you did that found the 20 or let me start over. The study you did that found the 20 non-targeted compounds, was that using existing technology, existing practices?
That was using existing produced water. Yes.
And so let's just look at those 20 or so that you found. Can those be removed from the produced water, the treated produced water?
Our work at New Mexico State is that yes, polishing steps and polishing technologies, also called tertiary treatment. Dr. Hugh called it tertiary treatment. We were able to remove those technologies or those constituents, either remove them or get them to levels that are below any health effect based upon the 800,000 chemicals that they fit into that we looked at on health issues and safety issues.
So at that point, if any of those non-targeted constituents remain, they would not be at levels that would cause harm to health?
That is correct.
And what's the basis of that again?
There is a database of the toxicity of some 800,000 chemicals that we compared those to. The non-targeted analysis allows you to go in and measure the molecular weight of those chemicals to the 4th decimal point. And so you can go into the database that we have, that the US EPA has, and identify what those chemicals could be and see what their hazards are and their toxicity levels. And you can compare our results to that table. And that's essentially what we did, how we did that.
Thank you, Mr. Hightower. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Mr. Cox, do you have questions of Mr. Hightower?
No, Madam Hearing Officer, I have no questions.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, do you have questions of Mr. Hightower?
Madam Hearing Officer, just checking time. Should I try to have a stop around 5:25?
Actually, the vice chair got us a little grace on the 5:30 time. We get to approach 6.
Great. Good afternoon, Mr. Hightower.
How you doing?
Good, thank you. Just got a few questions here about the pilot projects.
Okay.
So I would like to show you NMED Exhibit 138. May I approach? Are you familiar with this document?
I have several documents similar to this, but yes, I'm familiar with this document. Yes.
And this document shows, the list of consortium pilot projects.
Yes. These change kind of by month, but monthly, but this is a good representation of some of the projects we're looking at. Yes.
And by my count, there are 7 existing projects. Is that correct?
There are, talking about the ones in green or the ones in yellow?
Yes. And
So
Madam,
there's actually, I'm looking at it real quickly. I think there's another one on here that, no, it's on here. Yes, these are the ones. Yep.
and Madam Hearing Officer, Commissioners, my apologies. I'm looking at the hard copy I just passed out and realized that it did not print front and back. So if you'll look at New Mexico Environment Department Exhibit 138 in the record, that is what I'm referring to. Again, my apologies. Mr. Hightower, I believe you have my original copy. You have front and back, correct?
I do. Yes.
So, Mr. Hightower, are you involved with these projects? Can you briefly describe the nature of your involvement with these projects?
Surely these, as technologies are interested in participating with the consortium and having their systems tested and evaluated with the consortium, they either contact me or they contact Dr. Shu, and we talk to them and work out the schedule with them on where they'd like to do the test, where they want to do it in Bergenbor, for example, at a bench scale or a small pilot scale, or would they like to do it in the field? So when they want to do it in the field, we try to work with them to get a site that they could go to do it in the field. So we have kind of interactions over the course of a couple of months to get the project started, and then we look at the schedule and put a schedule together, etc. Then we generally put together a kind of a working group that is interested in that technology, that wants to work with that team, so that they can. One of the advantages is they have access to vendors, oil and gas companies, midstream companies, communities that may be interested in looking at this technology, so that we can coordinate that. And so we act kind of like a broker to get different groups in to see and how the system operates, as a way to instill interest in the technology and let people know what's out there and available for them to use.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do those working group members have access to this list?
Every working group member that participates in the treatment working group has access to these lists. I send it out, generally updated either every month or every other month. Yes.
And are there project evaluation teams for each of these projects?
Yes, there are.
And that's separate from the working groups?
That's separate from the working groups. The project evaluation teams are subgroups that are interested in this technology as it and can kind of coordinate on how the operations are run, go out to the site and look at how things are done, etc. Yes.
All right, I'd like to ask you about each project. The number one project that I have at the top of the list is Canalys Group LLC.
Right.
Who is on the project evaluation team for that pilot project?
Don't have that in front of me, but I can tell you a little bit about that technology right now. It is a.
No, thank you. I know we have very limited time. I just want to know who's on the project evaluation.
I don't
team.
have that with me. I mean, I have it on my computer, but I do not have that with me. I don't have it in my mind.
Are there completed data reports for the Canalys project? Data reports.
This Canalys project is currently underway, under construction. It has not started yet. No.
So NMED does not have completed data for that project.
They do not.
Has any data for that project been uploaded to the consortium's WaterStar data portal? Is the data being generated by the Canales project following the New Mexico Produced Water Research Consortium guidelines that are outlined in Wild Earth Guardians Exhibit 4, which I have a copy of, if I may approach? I hope this one printed correctly.
So this project, as I said, has not started yet. So there is no data yet. Okay. So the answer's hadn't started. So the answer's got to be no. We don't have any data. They're in construction right now.
Mr. Hightower, I just handed you what is marked as Wild Earth Guardians Exhibit 4. Are you familiar with this document?
Yes.
This document is entitled Guidance on Produced Water Sampling Procedure.
Yes.
And this is a document that outlines the sampling procedure and protocols that the consortium has developed for produced water sampling.
We developed that in conjunction with NMED. Yes, we did that together. And the USCPA was involved in developing those sampling procedures. Yes.
I'd like to move to number 2 on NMED Exhibit 138, which is the NMTech PESCO Hillcourt project.
Correct.
Do you know who's on the project evaluation team for this project?
I don't have it at my fingertips. No.
Do you know anyone who's on the project evaluation team for this project?
Yes, Deborah Dixon from the consortium is running this project. That's the only name I know. I don't have, there's 5 or 6 people on there, but I don't know.
Are there completed data reports for this project?
This project is with New Mexico Tech, and their system had some problems getting started. And then when they got started, they had to go to a different site. So they have to get a different site permit because they're now going to treat it at a different site. So this project has not started.
So the answer is no.
Well, there's no data because the project's not started.
So New Mexico Environment Department doesn't have any completed data reports for this project?
No.
Has any data been uploaded to the consortium's WaterStar data portal for this project?
No.
Is the data being generated by this pilot project following the produced water research guidelines that are outlined in Wild Earth Guardians Exhibit 4?
Objection.
What's your objection, Mr. Maxwell?
Asked and answered. This question has already been answered. He's made very well clear there's no data. It's not being collected. Not for this project.
Yes, Mr. Davis.
Madam Hearing Examiner, I am just trying to go through each of these projects to find out if that exists, and if so, where it does. So I don't want to assume that there's no data on the WaterStar data portal for this project.
Right. He's trying to tie up any potential loose ends here, I think, Mr. Maxwell. Go ahead.
I could go through these quickly if you wanted and tell you which ones have started and which ones do not have data and which ones do have data if that's better, but you can ask however you want to do that.
For purposes of the record, I'd prefer to go by them one by one, and we can, if there's not any data, maybe we can go quickly.
Okay.
So I'd like to move to number 3, the Sun Vapor Project. Do you know who's on the project evaluation team for this project?
Don't remember who's on it.
Can you name anyone who's on the project evaluation team for this project?
I have it on a list, but I don't have it in my head. No.
Are there completed data reports for this project?
This project has not gotten started yet. This is a project that is being funded by DOE, and they just got their funding to proceed with it. So that hasn't started.
Does NMED have any completed data for this project? Has data been uploaded to the consortium's WaterStar data portal for this project?
No.
Is all data being generated by this pilot project following the Produced Water Research Consortium's guidelines outlined in Wilderness Guardians Exhibit 4?
Objection.
Your
Asked and
objection,
answered for the same thing. He
so
already said no.
Mr. Maxwell, he's going through each of the projects one at a time. This is different from the last project. And
Okay,
I
so
would ask,
So the answer, I could say yes, because there is no data. So yes, they've got all the data we have.
Okay, I don't believe that was my question.
Okay, what was your question?
My question was whether any data being generated was following the Produced Water Resource Consortium guidelines.
Well, I can say all the data we generated followed the consortium guidelines because we haven't.
Because there's no data.
Yeah.
I'd like to move to project number 4, Infinity Water Solutions. Do you know who's on the project evaluation team for this pilot project?
I do not remember. There's 6 or 7 people.
Do you know the names of anyone who's on the project evaluation team for this project?
I don't have it in my memory. No,
Are there completed data reports for this project?
this project hasn't started yet either.
Does the New Mexico Environment Department have completed data for this project?
No,
Has data been uploaded to the consortium's WaterStar data portal for this project?
there's no data. So the answer is no.
Is data being generated by this pilot project following the New Mexico Produced Water Resource Consortium guidelines?
Will,
The answer is no, because there's no data.
there is no data, so I don't know that that's a no. But
I'd like to move to number 5, Ascosa Energy Partners Hydrozonics. Do you know who's on the project evaluation team for this pilot project?
this project is a enhanced evaporation project, and is not. It's an OCD funded project. That's probably not going forward because it requires an OCD permit and a surety bond that they're not going to proceed with.
Is there a project evaluation team for this project?
There is not a project evaluation for this project, no, because the project never got started.
So there's no completed data reports for this project,
No, there's not.
and no data has been uploaded to the WaterStar database.
Correct.
I'd like to move to project number 6, Sol Mem LLC.
Correct.
You know who's on the project evaluation team for this pilot project?
I do not have it off the top of my head.
You don't know anyone who's on.
I do not have it off the top of my head. No.
Are there any completed data reports for this project?
No, this project is just getting started.
So NMED doesn't have any completed data for this project.
No.
Has any data been uploaded to the consortium's WaterStar data portal for this project?
No.
Is all data being generated by this pilot project following the Produced Water Resource Consortium's guidelines as outlined in Wild Earth Guardians Exhibit 4?
Yes.
I'd like to move to number 7, Devon Energy Production Company LP Crystal Clearwater Resources Project.
Yes.
Do you know who's on the
Not.
project evaluation team for this project? Is that no?
No.
Are there completed data reports for this project?
No, this project is just getting underway. The technology is being moved out to the Permian Basin in Carlsbad currently.
Does NMED have any completed data for this project?
No, they do not.
Has data been uploaded to the consortium's WaterStar data portal for this project?
No, it has not.
Is all data being generated by this pilot project following the Produced Water Research Consortium's guidelines as outlined in Wild Earth Guardians Exhibit 4?
Yes.
Are all of these projects located in New Mexico?
All of these projects are located in New Mexico.
Are there any projects that we did not cover?
Although there's some in green that we have completed, and that's 8, 9, 10, and 11. Oh, 8, 9, and 10. So those projects have been completed, and their work has been uploaded. There are a couple of other projects on here that were done in Texas that we're working with groups in Texas and have gotten data, and we'll be uploading that data as we complete it. One of them is a Texas Pacific Water. The other one is, let's see if you have it on here, which is on a different list that I have. We just finished a study with a company in Texas that we do have data that we're just now finishing up that will be provided to NMED. It is a thermal technology. That's Circle Verde, which is mechanical vapor recompression system. That's not on your list here.
Did you say Circle Verde?
Circle Verde.
So-
CIRCLE, capital VER.
For the Texas Pacific project that you just mentioned?
Texas Pacific is a company out of Midland.
For that project, does the consortium have a project evaluation team?
As far as I know, we do. I don't know who's on that either. Not off the top of my,
And are there completed data reports for this project?
not yet, no. We're in the process of getting ready to collect the data with them.
That means NMED doesn't have any completed data,
No, they do not.
and it's not uploaded to the WaterStar data portal.
No, it's not.
Is the data from this Texas Pacific project
It's not collected.
following the
With-
Produced Water Resource Consortium guidelines?
Yes. And the Circle Verde project was done following guidelines here in consortium's guidelines.
Are there any other projects that are currently underway that we did not talk about that generate data the consortium is considering?
There are 3 other projects. All 3 of those projects are in Texas that we are working with, but they're not members, they're not associated with the consortium. But we have agreed to, if they're interested in working with the consortium, we will collect their water and do it in cooperation with the consortium following our sampling and evaluation guidelines. But those companies are working generally right now independently. The companies are
Mr. Hightower, if it may be difficult for you to reference this on the hard copy, and if it is, please let me know. But I would like to look at column U in NMED Exhibit 138, which has a heading of recovery rate.
okay.
Are you able to see that?
I don't.
May I approach? That column has a heading that says recovery rate. Is that correct?
Excuse me. It does.
Is the data by which you calculate that recovery rate considered completed data?
So I'm looking, it doesn't have a title, but I can tell by where it's at that which projects these might be. Okay. So it looks like
If you scroll to the left, you'll see, I believe that the Canales project shows a 25% recovery rate.
okay, then I'm looking at that. That looks about correct. Yeah.
Is that data available to NMED?
We have a report on the Canales project, yes, that we presented, and should be available to. It's on our website. Should be available to NMED.
And Canales is the only completed project that we've been through today.
Let's see. No. Well, the one that we've been through today, there's Zwitterco is a completed project. It was a pre-treatment project. It's number 10 on your list. Canales has been completed. CCR, which doesn't show up on your list, has been completed, or it's not showing up in green. That has been completed, and the Circle Verde project has been completed. That doesn't show up on your list in green either.
So for project number 4, Infinity Water Solutions, I see that there is a 50 to 66% recovery rate. Is that based on completed data?
Infinity Water Solutions, which one is that?
Number 4.
Number 4. That project really, they're still in the process. They've done some pre-treatment. They're trying to do a desalination, but they haven't done their desalination project yet.
So the 50 to 66% recovery rate is not based on completed data?
No, it's not.
I'd like to ask you a few questions about the WaterStar data portal.
Surely. Okay.
Who has access to that portal?
It's open access. You can get to it through our website, through the consortium's website.
And access is limited to the public.
Anybody can get to the data portal through our public website. So the public has access to the data portal.
Is any of the data limited to the public?
The data that's in there, no, is not data. The data that we have currently is not limited to anybody. It's open to all the public. So if you're referring to the tiers 3 and 4 that was discussed yesterday or the day before by NMED, we haven't populated that. That was areas that we left open with GWPC in case there was issues around, similar to what was around frac focus, if there was going to be some proprietary issues. So far, we haven't seen any proprietary issues with anyone as far as water quality data, because all the data that's in there is from OCD. So that's all open source data from OCD put into a data portal that makes it easier to use for industry and others. So there is no, the 4th tier, which is only for regulatory agencies, there's no data in there. We haven't put anything in there because there has been no interest by anyone in detecting water quantity data. Okay.
In your original direct testimony that you filed, your written testimony, you stated that our studies, and studies by other states clearly show that pre-treatment, treatment, and post-treatment polishing technologies can be used within a treatment train approach to effectively and safely treat produced water to meet the current water quality discharge numerical and narrative criteria for applications identified in NMAC 20.6.4.900. Is that a fair representation of your direct testimony?
I think that's almost exactly what I said, yes.
Is the data from your studies that you mentioned in your direct testimony available in the WaterStar data portal?
No, the WaterStar data portal is focused on water quality of the raw produced water. That's so it's different from the treatment studies. The treatment studies are presented to the consortium members as drafts, but they're not available until they've gone through peer review and have been published. That's part of the deal that we have with NMED, is that anything that we make open to the public has to have gone through peer review first. So the studies of CCR are currently in review, have been accepted, and the studies from Circle Verde have been submitted for a final peer-reviewed journals. So that's
the data from the studies
yeah. Do you need
that we just referenced in your direct testimony are not available on the WaterStar data portal?
No, they are not.
Is that data from those studies available to NMED at this time?
Yes, through the presentations that we've given to the consortium at the consortium meetings on a summary of that data that's been presented to the consortium on multiple occasions, but most recently the final non-target analysis results were presented in December for the CCR data, and we will be presenting the data on the Circle Verde studies at our June meeting, our mid-year June meeting. So those will be available, and those studies, then all that information goes onto the website, so that is available as far as draft.
Okay, so I heard quite a few things there.
Okay.
One, I heard that NMED was at a presentation that the consortium gave. Is that accurate?
Of the meeting in December, yes.
And at that meeting, you made a presentation about your study.
The consortium, people within the consortium gave a presentation on that study, yes, on the CCR non-target analysis results.
And NMED has access to all the data associated with that project.
It was everything that we presented and all the data was on published on the website. Yes.
And then I heard that NMED will get data in the future regarding a separate project.
June, we will present on the Circle Verde. Yes.
NMED does not have that data at this time.
That is correct.
You mentioned earlier today that the consortium was able to identify 20 unknowns, or I believe you called them TICs, tentatively identified compounds, that you discovered in produced water. Is that correct?
I said approximately 20. That's correct.
Can you identify what those unknown compounds are today?
I don't have them with me, but we were presented in December.
Where is the data that would identify those? How would I access that?
A presentation by Dr. Himali.
I would have to go to a present.
Himali, Himali, from NMSU.
So I would have to go to a presentation by Dr. Himali.
Correct.
That data is not publicly available.
It's publicly available on the website, but it hasn't been released publicly in a peer-reviewed journal. That's the publication that just came out. Journal of Hazardous Materials.
Does NMED currently have the data that would allow them to identify those compounds?
Yes, I guess if they have it on the website, then as soon as this paper comes out, they'll get a copy of it. Yeah. But if it's on the website, excuse me, they wanted to get it, they could get it. Yeah.
Could a member of the public access that information
Yes. Off the
by
website.
going to the consortium's website?
Correct.
It's available today on their website.
As far as I know, it's supposed to be uploaded back in December 2023.
Did the consortium perform a toxicological analysis on these TICs?
Yes, they did.
Is that data available currently
Yes, it is.
to the public?
Should be on the website. It was presented at the same annual meeting.
Do you,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Davis. Did you find a good stopping point? We need a few minutes to pack up.
I believe I can wrap up quickly.
Thank you.
Do you know if the data regarding the TICs that we were just talking about, does it include chemical abstract service numbers?
I think it does. Yeah. Not my area of expertise, but I think it does.
Just got a few more questions for you and we can wrap up.
All right.
Earlier today, you stated that raw produced water is a hazardous material.
I think that I'm not going to say all. I said I think most produced waters that I know of would be considered as hazardous materials. They either are corrosive, toxic, or have other constituents that would make them, by definition, hazardous.
Are any of the current pilot projects that we discussed today in NMED Exhibit 138 taking place at locations that are off the oil field?
The only one that we have here that's off the oil field is the one Salmim, which is at Bergendorf.
Is it fair to say that the pilot projects are conducting research for applications of produced water, treated produced water that are unrelated to the exploration or production of oil and gas?
So the tests that we're running are treatment technology tests. There is no application associated with those. So they are only tests to evaluate the efficacy of the treatment technology relative to the raw water versus the final treated water.
Did the Canales project not contemplate the use of treated produced water for agricultural purposes?
They did that project, but the way that they did that test was that they did the test so we did a no discharge. So these are set up so that you can't do discharge, but they got approval to do a test at a greenhouse at New Mexico State. So they did have in the back of their mind that they were going to treat that water because of where they were for agricultural applications. But that is the only technology that we have tested that had a application in mind.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hightower. I have no further questions, Madam Hearing Officer. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. We will reconvene at 9 a.m. and begin with public comment.
Question. Can you explain what is going to happen with the rest of the cross-examination with Mr. Hightower?
Yes, we are going to find a time either tomorrow afternoon or at some point Friday for all the other parties to cross-examine.
And that's going to be on WebEx?
Yes.